No one really expected Jake the dog to happen, not even the universe. He didn't come into the world in any typical way, not by a stork, or a magic wish, or even your average cartoon logic. Jake's birth was strange, a ripple in the fabric of reality, a quiet moment in the shadows that set off a lifetime of light. Let's drift back to where it all began. Joshua and Margaret were legendary adventurers, brave, clever, and constantly finding themselves in the kinds of scrapes that only truly seasoned monster fighters would survive. They were dogs, yes, but not ordinary ones. They were part of something bigger, guardians of a wild and unpredictable world. One day, while on a mission, Joshua got into a rough fight with a mysterious, shape-shifting creature. And during the struggle, the creature bit him right on the head. Now, this wasn't just any bite. It wasn't just a scratch or a nip. It was something deeper, something that planted a little sliver of magic inside him. Something alive. Joshua didn't even realize it at the time. He just came home, bandaged himself up, and went on with life, as adventurers do. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this so far, I'd be so grateful if you subscribed. I put a lot of time and heart into making these videos, and every new subscriber genuinely helps me keep going. Thanks for being here. But sometime later, Margaret noticed something strange, a little creature, almost like a puppy, squirming around inside Joshua's head. It sounds bizarre, and it was. She helped remove the creature, and they both stared at it, blinking in confusion. That strange little being, that impossibility made flesh, was Jake. He didn't cry, he didn't bark. He just sort of stretched and then smiled. They had no idea what he was, really. But in that moment, they knew one thing. He was theirs. Jake was raised alongside another pup, Finn the human, a baby they found abandoned in the woods, wrapped in leaves, surrounded by a circle of fireflies. The two boys didn't question their beginnings. They just grew together, learned together, fell into rhythms of laughter and exploring and sleeping under the stars. Jake, from the very start, was odd in the best way. He could stretch like rubber, reshape himself into anything he imagined, a horse, a hammer, a parachute, even a dancing cube. His powers didn't come from training. They were simply part of him, like freckles or dimples. He used them to pull pranks, rescue lost kittens, and float lazily above the grass while chewing bubble gum. But behind all the fun, there was always a question. What is Jake, really? He looked like a dog. He barked when he was excited. But the magic that lived inside him didn't feel like it belonged to the world of dogs, or even this dimension. There was something deeper, something ancient and slippery and strange. And Jake never seemed to care. He'd say things like, "Hey, I'm just Jake," with a sleepy grin, and go back to napping on a rock. That was his magic, too, his calm. While Finn leapt into every problem, sword first, Jake liked to drift, to follow the vibe, to believe everything would turn out okay. But the mystery of his origin never truly went away. Even as a puppy, sometimes he'd dream of distant stars and giant blinking eyes. He'd wake up humming songs no one taught him. He'd sleepwalk into hidden places, leaving trails of shimmering footprints behind. Joshua and Margaret did their best to treat him like a normal kid. And to be fair, he was, in his own way. He had breakfast, played with toys, and learned how to tell good guys from bad. But every now and then he'd stretch a little farther than he should have, or whisper to animals in a language they seemed to understand, as if some part of him still remembered where he came from. And maybe he did, somewhere deep in his stretchy, magical heart. Jake's childhood passed like a dream made of sunlight and silly noises. He and Finn, side by side, were unstoppable. They made forts out of pillows and declared themselves kings of the living room. They used cardboard swords to fight imaginary beasts. Sometimes those beasts weren't so imaginary, but with Jake's stretch powers and Finn's wild spirit, they always came out on top. There was magic in that bond. Not just because of what they could do, but because of who they were together. Jake didn't need to understand the exact details of his existence. He had Finn. He had a warm place to nap, a pile of pancakes on Sundays, and an infinite ability to stretch his limbs or his heart around whatever the moment called for. But for the viewer, for those who watched Jake closely, there's a quiet thread weaving through his life, a sense that Jake came from something forgotten, something not meant for this world. At some point as the years passed and the boys grew into adventurers, whispers about Jake's origins began to surface. You see, that shape-shifting creature, the one that bit Joshua, it wasn't just some wandering beast. It might have been an interdimensional being, something ancient, something tied to the fundamental magic of the land of Oo. It might have passed a piece of itself into Jake, a spark, a sliver of cosmic goo that came to life with a personality and a soul, a purpose, even if Jake never sought it. And still, Jake didn't let this disturb him. That was never his way. While others would spiral into existential questions, who am I? Why am I here? What does it mean to exist in a world built on post-apocalyptic ruins and bubblegum kingdoms? Jake would just hum a tune and make himself into a floating hammock. He wasn't in denial, he was just Jake. He believed in letting things be what they were. He didn't fear the unknown. He was the unknown in a way, and that made him incredibly special. As Jake and Finn began to explore more of the land of Oo, Jake's powers expanded. He could become massive, towering above trees. He could squeeze into a teacup. He could split himself into copies, become a wheel, grow wings, take on shapes that had no name. And when others asked where his powers came from, he'd just say, "I don't know, man. They've always been there." There was a kind of peace in that answer, a gentle acceptance that some things don't need to be explained, that maybe it's okay to just exist, to be strange and funny and stretchy and soft. But the world around Jake didn't always share that peace. Some feared what they didn't understand. Some were fascinated. Others tried to study him, to test him, to poke and prod at what made him Jake. Still, he stayed grounded. That's part of his magic, too. While others were caught in the drama of destiny and prophecy, Jake found joy in the little things, eating a perfect sandwich, dancing in the grass, or playing the viola under moonlight. Even as mysteries swirled around him, Jake reminded us of something important. You don't have to understand everything to be at peace with it. You don't have to be normal to be loved. And Jake was deeply loved. He was a big brother, a best friend, a father, a partner, and eventually something more. A being so in tune with himself that he didn't need to chase his past or control his future. But still, as calm as he seemed, Jake wasn't empty. There were moments, quiet ones, when he'd sit on a mountaintop staring into the stars, moments when his smile softened, when his brow furrowed just slightly, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. Maybe he was remembering. Maybe he was wondering if that strange creature, the one who passed its magic into Joshua, was still out there, watching, waiting, wondering what Jake had become. Or maybe Jake wasn't thinking about any of that at all. Maybe he was just admiring the clouds. Either way, that's what makes Jake so fascinating. He's not just a dog with powers. He's not just a comic relief character or a stretchy sidekick. He's a mystery wrapped in a warm blanket. He's a being born of something wild and unknowable, who chose to live with kindness, humor, and love. Jake didn't need a grand origin story to feel important. His existence was the story, a reminder that you don't have to come from somewhere grand to become something beautiful. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real magic. Jake never sought to unravel the cosmic puzzle of his beginning. He didn't track down the creature that bit Joshua. He didn't comb through ancient scrolls or visit magical archives. That was more Finn's style. Action-driven, goal-oriented, hungry for answers. Jake preferred questions that didn't need answering. And in that way, he became a mirror to the world around him. People projected all kinds of meaning onto him. Some thought he was a force of balance. Others feared he might be a ticking time bomb of weird energy. A few even worshipped him, though Jake would have laughed gently at that idea and offered them a snack. He wasn't here to be a symbol. He just wanted to play the viola in peace. Still, those who spent time with Jake could feel something about him. Something a little off, but in a good way, like sitting in a chair that shouldn't be comfortable, but somehow is. Or hearing a lullaby in a language you don't understand, but still feeling soothed by it. Even Princess Bubblegum, the hyper-rational scientist, had moments when she looked at Jake and tilted her head. Curious, maybe even a little cautious. She once hinted that his DNA structure didn't follow any known biological rules, that he was, in a scientific sense, a total weirdo. Jake just shrugged. Thanks, I guess. Maybe that was his superpower, not just the stretching or the cosmic birth or the casual relationship with physics, but the way he made people feel okay being themselves. Weirdness wasn't a flaw to Jake. It was a language, one he spoke fluently. And that language shaped his whole life. As Finn and Jake began taking on bigger adventures, facing off against candy zombies, ice kings, and ancient gods, Jake's powers and his temperament proved essential. He could get Finn out of nearly any situation. He could fly, punch, shield, escape, and transform. But more importantly, he could ground Finn. In the middle of chaos, Jake was the breath between shouts, the nap between battles, the sigh of relief that reminded everyone, hey, it's gonna be okay. But as you lay here now, letting your body rest and your mind drift, it's worth wondering, how did Jake learn to be that way? Was it something Margaret taught him with her soothing voice and steady paw? Was it Joshua's gruff strength, tempered by hidden gentleness? Was it Finn, the brother who needed someone calm to anchor him? Or was it that little cosmic flicker inside Jake, the part born of something unknowable that made him so in tune with the rhythm of the universe? Jake never told us. Not because he was hiding it, but because for him it didn't matter. He was here, he existed. He loved, he laughed, he stretched. That was enough. And isn't that kind of peace the most magical power of all? In many ways, Jake's early life was a story of balance. Magic and mundanity, mystery and comfort, chaos and calm. He could be in the middle of a fight with a villain from a cursed dimension and still find time to crack a joke or offer someone a bite of a sandwich. He could be chased by flaming skeletons and still pause to admire a particularly cool-looking tree. He lived life on a different frequency, a slower one, a gentler one. And that frequency was contagious. People around Jake slowed down. They smiled more. They sighed with relief. They felt safe. Even if they didn't understand him. Even if he didn't understand himself. Maybe that's why his mysterious birth never became a burden. It never defined him. It was just one part of a much bigger, softer picture. Jake wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to live well, to love his family, to enjoy the view, to nap when he needed to show up for the people he cared about, even if it meant flying into danger, or stretching across dimensions, or turning into a giant magical hand. He never let the strangeness of his origins turn into fear. He never became bitter or obsessed. He didn't chase some unreachable truth about who he was supposed to be. He just was. And that quiet kind of being, that gentle, stretchy, golden sort of presence, is something truly rare, especially in a world as loud and chaotic as ooh. So maybe in the end, Jake didn't need to come from the stars or a prophecy or a lab experiment gone wrong. Maybe it was enough that he came from love, from Joshua's resilience, from Margaret's warmth, from a strange moment between worlds that gave birth to something soft, funny, and endlessly curious. Maybe Jake was never meant to be understood. Maybe he was only meant to be felt. As Jake grew older, his powers remained steady, but his priorities gently shifted. He still stretched and fought, still pulled off wild tricks midair and transformed into bizarre shapes on a whim. But more and more he leaned into the quiet things, making music, spending time with Lady Rainicorn, raising his pups, floating in the sun with a cold drink in hand. There was a grace to it, a soft wisdom that had always been there but now began to bloom. And perhaps that's when Jake's origin became less of a mystery and more of a gift. Not because someone finally explained it, not because a magical tome revealed a hidden prophecy or a glowing portal opened in the sky, but because Jake had become himself fully, peacefully, completely. And he was no longer the strange puppy who crawled from a wound in Joshua's head. He was Jake the dog, father, friend, adventurer, musician, philosopher, noodle-limbed comfort creature. He didn't need to ask why anymore. And yet, the world continued to ask. There were whispers about him in distant lands, ancient creatures who blinked slowly when they heard his name, as if it stirred some ancient knowing. Magical beings who looked at him and saw more than his golden fur and sleepy grin. There were theories. Some believed Jake was touched by primordial chaos, the living embodiment of play in a universe torn by war. Others said he was a spiritual echo from a forgotten realm, a memory that became real. A few even believed that Jake wasn't born, but willed into existence by the universe itself, as a counterbalance to the darkness that lingered beneath Ooh's surface. If you asked Jake about any of this, he'd probably just yawn, stretch into a reclining couch and say, "That's pretty cool, man, but I'm trying to nap." And maybe that's the most honest answer of all. Because in a world filled with kings and curses, candy people and vampires, time travel and soul swords, Jake found something rarer than power or knowledge. He found peace. He learned that you don't have to come from something great to be great. That mystery doesn't need solving if you're living with love. That weirdness is beautiful, and questions can be restful when you don't demand answers. Jake is a reminder that existence doesn't need a thesis. It just needs intention, presence, laughter, connection. He is proof that a life lived gently can still be epic, that a being born from strange circumstances can become a beacon of calm in a world forever spinning. So as we close this first chapter of his lore, imagine Jake lying under a tree, one arm behind his head, the other holding a slice of pie. The breeze rustles the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, Finn is yelling something about adventure. Jake smiles but doesn't move right away. He's content. He knows he'll join the journey. But right now he's just enjoying the stillness. Because Jake's story didn't begin with answers. It began with something strange and soft and undefined. And somehow, that was always enough. Jake's powers weren't just flashy tricks. They were expressions of his soul. At first glance, they seemed simple. He could stretch, grow, shrink, wiggle into strange shapes, and bounce back without a scratch. A cartoon come to life. But the more time you spent watching Jake, the more you realized this wasn't ordinary magic. This wasn't even normal weirdness. It was something deeper, something old, something alive inside him. Jake's stretching powers were as natural to him as breathing. He didn't chant spells or study ancient runes. He just felt it. Needed a longer arm? Boom, his arm was a mile long. Needed to shield Finn from a giant boulder? No problem. Jake would puff up into a big golden dome. Needed to fit into a teacup or disguise himself as a piece of toast. Done and done. But behind the silliness was something remarkable, an ability to reshape reality around himself. Jake didn't just stretch, he transformed. With intention, with creativity, with feeling. Like a jazz musician who doesn't read music, but plays with his whole being, Jake improvised his magic on the fly, guided by instinct and imagination. And it wasn't just his body that could change. Jake's powers responded to emotion, to desire, to love, fear, joy, even laziness. He could inflate himself into a giant air balloon when he was feeling relaxed and float gently across a canyon. Or if he got startled, he might compress into a tight little ball of nerves, literally. That's the thing. His magic wasn't just reactive, it was intimate. It wasn't taught, it was felt. Sometimes it seemed like his powers had a mind of their own, especially when he wasn't fully paying attention. In one moment, he'd be mid-nap, snoring softly on a picnic blanket, and in the next, his leg would stretch all the way to the horizon to snag a sandwich he'd forgotten in the treehouse. Jake didn't even blink. "My subconscious is hungry," he'd mumble. And maybe that was true, because Jake's magic lived in every part of him, not just in his brain or hands, but in his belly, his dreams, his laughter. It was part of who he was, not a tool, not a weapon, but an extension of his spirit. And when he wanted to, Jake could do things that defied even the wildest rules of ooh. He could become huge, towering over mountains, big enough to carry houses on his back. Or he could go tiny, so small he could ride a ladybug's wing. He could flatten himself into a sail, split into multiple versions of himself, or even vibrate so fast he became a blur of golden light. Some believe Jake's powers came from the creature that bit Joshua, that it passed on some kind of interdimensional DNA, gooey, stretchy, ancient. But if that's true, then that creature didn't just give Jake a gift. It gave him a link to something greater, something beyond space and time. In certain moments, rare, quiet moments, you could almost feel it. When Jake entered a deep trance or played his viola with his eyes closed, or stared into the night sky without saying a word, it was like his body remembered something his mind never learned, something cosmic, something before. And in those moments, his magic would shift. Less cartoon, more celestial. He could become stars, comets, spirals of golden wind. It was beautiful and a little haunting, because Jake never really questioned these powers, and he didn't seek to control them. He just welcomed them, lived with them, flowed with them. And that's what made him so different from wizards or sorcerers. They chased knowledge, rituals, scrolls. Jake just listened to his heart and moved. To some, that made him dangerous. To others, sacred. To his friends, though, it just made him Jake. Jake's powers weren't about dominance. They were about response. If Finn leapt without thinking, Jake was already stretching out beneath him, a living safety net. If danger came too fast, Jake's arms became walls. If sadness lingered too long, Jake morphed into a goofy creature, part clown, part comfort animal, until a smile returned to his brother's face. It was empathy, made physical. And somehow his abilities always met the moment. One time, when Finn needed to reach the top of a distant cliff, Jake became a bridge, stretching calmly across the chasm, humming to himself, relaxed as if nothing could ever go wrong. Another time, he turned into a shield to block a fireball mid-battle, laughing as it scorched his backside. "Little toasty," he said, "but we're good." That calmness, that playful certainty, it made his magic feel safe even when it was wild. Most magical beings in U treated their power like a sword or a crown, something to be brandished. But Jake treated it like a blanket, something soft, something useful, something to share. He never used it to show off, not really, though he could and sometimes did. But his magic wasn't about ego. It was about being there, helping, hugging, healing, and sometimes hiding. Jake could disappear into a crack in the wall, flatten into a book, even dissolve into puddle form if the moment called for it. He didn't mind stepping out of the spotlight. He didn't mind disappearing for a while. Because Jake knew presence wasn't always about being seen. It was about being available. But there were moments when his powers hinted at something more, something vast, like the time he fused with the very ground, or when he reached across dimensions without effort, as if he knew the shape of every reality by heart. Or when he once casually mentioned mid-stretch, "Yeah, I think I've been dreaming while awake for the last 3 days." Nobody questioned it, because Jake bent the laws of the universe, not by force, but by being himself. Even magical experts were baffled by him. Princess Bubblegum tried running tests. Ice King tried writing fan fiction about him. Magic Man just laughed and called Jake a walking paradox wrapped in noodles. None of them could explain it. Because Jake's magic wasn't technical, it was emotional, organic. It came from trust, comfort, and whimsy. From naps and music and sandwiches, from daydreams, from love. And that's why his powers were so unpredictable and so perfect. When Jake became a parent, his magic shifted again. It softened, became more protective, more grounded. His pups inherited bits of his stretching power, some in tiny ways, others in bold, chaotic bursts. Jake never pushed them to use it. He just smiled and said, "You'll know when it's time." And they always did. That's how Jake lived, with an open heart and a stretchy soul. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, he would do things that no one else ever noticed. Subtle, strange things, like plucking a floating star from the sky and tucking it behind his ear, or stretching his ear so gently across the horizon that he could listen to the sound of the ocean and a hummingbird at the same time. Jake once told BMO, "Sometimes I just like feeling what's out there. Like everything, you know?" And BMO, in their tiny robot way, nodded solemnly, because they did know. Jake could touch the fabric of reality without ripping it. He could hug a black hole and tell it a joke. He could ride a moonbeam like a slide and land in a meadow without a sound. He didn't need to fight the universe. He just played with it. And maybe that's the secret. Maybe Jake's powers were never about control or strength or speed. Maybe they were about harmony. Jake's harmony with his powers made him different from every other magical being in Ooh. He wasn't trained in a tower or chosen by destiny. He didn't recite spells or wear a magic ring. His gift didn't come with instructions or limitations. It just was, like a breeze, like sunlight, like a soft melody that drifts into your dreams. And maybe that's what made him so rare. He didn't just use magic, he was magic. A living, breathing, stretching expression of play, kindness, and spontaneity. There was this one time, deep in the crystal dimension, when Jake encountered a space where sound bent backward and gravity spiraled inward. Finn couldn't move without getting pulled into a floating loop. But Jake, he just chuckled, flattened himself into a swan-like shape, and rode the dimension like a river. He didn't fight it. He flowed with it. Because that's what Jake always did. When the world twisted, he twisted too. When it broke, he softened. When it cracked, he filled the gap. And not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. His powers followed his intentions even when he didn't quite understand them himself. Like the time he accidentally turned into a giant muscle-bound version of himself after being complimented too much. Or when he became a literal suit of armor for Finn, wrapping around him like a second skin to protect him from a magical onslaught. Or that beautiful, weird moment when he turned into a floating ear to help a sad, echoing cave feel heard. Jake had no rules, just response. That was his superpower. And sometimes, that power got very weird. He once turned into a living key and unlocked a door made entirely of sound. Another time, he turned into a balloon animal version of himself just to cheer up a lonely ghost. He once became a tree for a full day so a family of birds could build a nest in his branches. And when someone asked him why, he just smiled and said, "Felt right." Jake's magic was empathy made form. Even in battle, he didn't fight to destroy. He fought to protect, to support, to calm. When enemies towered over Finn, Jake didn't get angry. He got bigger. Not to intimidate, but to give Finn the confidence to stand taller. There was always this undercurrent of love in everything he did. A deep knowing that his magic didn't need rules. It needed meaning. And there were moments when Jake's magic hinted at something eternal. Like the time he floated through space without oxygen, smiling gently, arms behind his head, watching the stars. Or when he slipped into an astral form during a dream and spoke with a cosmic moth about the nature of sleep and the importance of stillness. Or when he became music, pure sound, during a lullaby, wrapping the treehouse in a glowing warmth that left everyone silent and teary-eyed. He didn't talk about these things. He just lived them. Jake understood that not all magic needed an explanation. That some powers were meant to be felt, not dissected. That mystery could be soft and nourishing. And perhaps most amazing of all, Jake didn't need his powers to be powerful. Even without his stretching, he would have still been Jake. Still thoughtful. Still wise in the way only someone who naps a lot can be. Still the glue holding his family together. Still the gentle tide that brought peace where there was tension. But with his powers, he became something mythic. A hero, yes, but more than that. A presence. A reminder that softness can be strong. That laughter is sacred. That magic at its heart might just be love, made stretchy. There's a quiet beauty in the way Jake used his powers. No one ever sat him down and explained what he could or couldn't do. There was no training montage, no scroll revealing his true potential. He never tried to unlock some secret final form or ascend to wizardhood. That wasn't his path. Jake's magic grew with him, slowly, steadily, like a plant reaching for light. And just like a plant, It bent toward what nourished it, toward love, toward peace, toward silliness, toward people who needed him. That's why his powers sometimes did the unexpected, not just stretching or growing, but healing. There were quiet moments where his touch soothed a friend's wound, or when he wrapped himself around someone crying, and they stopped shaking. Not because of word, but because his presence made the world feel less scary. In those moments, Jake wasn't using his powers. His powers were using him as a channel, as a comfort, as a hug. And maybe that's what made him so remarkable. Even when he was being ridiculous, turning into a chair for Finn to sit on, or stretching his face into a perfect pancake for breakfast, there was always heart behind it. He wanted to bring ease, to lift burdens, to lighten the weight of existence, one laugh at a time. That's the essence of Jake's magic. It didn't take from the world. It gave to it. There's a story from the time he visited the dream realm. He met a creature there, woven from forgotten lullabies. The creature asked, "What shape do you take when no one is looking?" And Jake thought for a long while. Then he smiled and said, "The same shape I always do, whatever shape you need." That was Jake. Whether he was a sword or a stairway, a boat or a pillow, a punching glove or a parachute, Jake was always showing up. For his friends, for strangers, for the quiet moments in between adventures. He even stretched himself across time, literally. In one of the strangest and most beautiful moments in O, Jake existed in multiple timelines simultaneously, different versions of himself, all exploring the world in their own gentle, weird ways, a cosmic jazz solo played across eternity. And when they rejoined into one Jake again, he just burped softly and said, "Whoa, trippy?" It's funny. For someone with so much power, Jake never sought control, never tried to fix everything. He trusted that life would bend and bounce like he did, unpredictable, but not unkind. He didn't need to stretch across the sky to prove anything. He didn't need to become a castle, or a dragon, or a lightning bolt, though he could if he wanted. He just needed to be there, to be flexible, to listen, to love in his stretchy, sleepy, snack-loving way. And in that way, Jake's magical abilities became more than powers. They became a way of life, a philosophy, a quiet wisdom that said, don't push the world, bend with it. Don't fear change, be change. Don't chase perfection, be silly, be soft, be stretchy. So when you think of Jake, maybe you picture him turning into a motorbike, zooming down a mountain trail with Finn, or growing huge to dance with Lady Rainicorn in the sky, or curling up in a hammock he made from his own tail, snoring peacefully while the wind rustles the leaves. But deeper than all that, you remember what he represented: freedom, joy, flow. A kind of living reminder that magic doesn't have to be loud or sparkly or dramatic. It can be quiet, gentle, weird in the best way. It can be a dog who loves his brother, a friend who stretches without asking why, a golden thread that ties the fabric of ooh together without needing recognition. Jake never asked for a legacy, he just lived one. And as we drift into the next chapter of his story, his magic continues to echo, not just in the land of ooh, but in every soft breath, every sleepy dream, every moment when the world feels a little more flexible, because someone like Jake was in it. Jake and Finn? Even just saying their names together feels right, like the cadence of a lullaby or the beat of a well-worn tune. You almost can't think of one without the other. They were more than brothers. They were soulmates in adventure, a duo stitched together not just by fate, but by choice, by countless mornings spent chasing clouds and nights whispering secrets beneath starlit branches. Their bond wasn't flashy. It was lived in. It was real. Jake met Finn when he was just a baby, tiny, squishy, and crying in the middle of the woods. Most people would panic at a sight like that. But not Jake. He just looked down at this little human, looked up at his parents, Joshua and Margaret, and said, "Can we keep him?" And from that moment on, they were brothers. Not by blood, but by something stronger, loyalty, love. That unspoken magic that says, "You are mine, and I've got you, always." Jake wasn't just Finn's brother. He was his babysitter, his best friend, his role model, even if he didn't mean to be. He changed diapers with one paw and played peekaboo with the other. He sang lullabies while stretching into a rocking chair. And as Finn got older, Jake didn't outgrow him. He grew with him. They trained together, fought monsters together, built forts, and dreamed side by side. Finn with his boundless energy and fiery idealism, whereas Jake with his laid-back wisdom and his sleepy confidence. They balanced each other like two ends of a seesaw, always finding equilibrium no matter how the world tilted. When Finn charged ahead without thinking, Jake was the anchor. When Jake wanted to nap through a crisis, Finn pulled him into action. They never needed to say much. A look, a nod, a well-timed stretch, that was enough. But what made their bond truly special wasn't just the fun. It was the care. Jake didn't just fight beside Finn, he protected his heart. When Finn felt lost, Jake found him. When he was hurting, Jake listened. Not with advice always, but with presence. And a quiet kind of listening that says, you don't have to figure it out alone. Like the time Finn's first love didn't go as planned, and his heart was bruised in that tender adolescent way. Jake didn't tease. He didn't rush him to feel better. He just sat beside him, played soft tunes on his viola, and said, "That's rough, man. Want to talk? Or just want to chill?" And Finn, fiery, proud Finn, leaned into Jake's side and just breathed. That's what Jake offered. Space, safety. The kind of unconditional love that asked for nothing in return. But Jake wasn't just the wise older brother. He was silly. Wildly, wonderfully silly. He made Finn laugh when he needed it most. Turned into a giant mustache just to make a point. Beatboxed while doing laundry. Made up games with names like Slide Whistle Hallway and Kitchen Floor Banana Peel Derby. And Finn, he adored every second of it. Because Jake didn't just protect him, he delighted in him. Treated him not as a tag-along or a burden, but as a partner, an equal. Even when Finn was small and new to the world, Jake believed in him, cheered him on, made him feel like he could do anything. And that belief became a foundation. It's why Finn grew up brave, why he stood so tall, even in the face of dragons and heartbreak and the end of the world. Because somewhere deep down, he knew Jake had his back. Always. Even when they fought, and they did sometimes, they never stayed mad. Jake would stretch himself into a peace sign, or Finn would bake him apology pancakes. They knew that disagreements were just weather. The bond was the sky itself, vast, permanent, and full of stars. Some friendships are forged in fire, others in laughter. But Jake and Finn, their bond was built in the in-betweens, the quiet walks between battles, the lazy breakfasts on treehouse mornings, the long pauses where no one needed to talk because everything that mattered was already understood. They trusted each other with the deepest kind of ease. Jake never doubted Finn's heart, even when it got him into trouble. And Finn, he never questioned Jake's love, even when he drifted or got distracted or vanished into his weird dog dreams. There was always a tether between them, invisible but unbreakable, stretching across distances, dimensions, even entire lifetimes. That's the thing about their bond. It grew up with them. When Finn was a child, Jake was the protector, the older brother who kept the nightmares away and turned every bad day into an adventure. But as Finn matured, started asking harder questions about life and love and identity, Jake didn't resist the change. He adapted. Let Finn lead more. Let him stumble and get back up. He knew when to hold tight and when to let go. And that's not easy. Watching someone you love become their own person is bittersweet. But Jake never held Finn back. He encouraged him to explore, to make his own choices, even when those choices led to heartache. Because that's what love does. It doesn't cling. It supports. And through it all, Jake remained a constant. He was there when Finn fell in love, and when love fell apart. He was there when Finn questioned his past, his future, and everything in between. Jake didn't always have the answers, but he had presence. And sometimes, presence is the greatest gift a brother can give. You see it in the way Jake watches Finn, quietly proud, as he saves the Candy Kingdom, or stands up to cosmic entities. You see it in the way he chuckles when Finn gets a little too intense, then gently pulls him back to earth with a stretch and a snack. Jake never tried to change Finn. He just celebrated him. And Finn, he adored Jake, not just for his powers or his jokes or his musical talents, but for his soul, for his softness, for the way he could find beauty in a sandwich, wisdom in a nap, or peace in a moment of silence. There's a moment that says it all. They're sitting on a mountaintop after a long battle. The stars are out, and the wind is cold. Finn's legs are scraped, and his sword is chipped. He sighs and says, "Man, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore." And Jake, he just puts a warm paw on Finn's shoulder and says, "You're doing it, dude. That's all anyone can ask." Not a speech, not a plan, just faith. The kind of faith that says, "I see you, I know you, and I'm here." That mountaintop, that was just one of hundreds of moments, because their story wasn't made up of big events. It was built from little things, the games, the inside jokes, the way they could communicate with a raised eyebrow or a well-timed fart sound. Even their silence spoke volumes. And what's beautiful is that their bond wasn't just about them. It spilled over into everything they touched. Their love made the world brighter, gave hope to the hopeless, showed the people of Ooh what true friendship looks like when it's lived with honesty and joy. And in time, they weren't just brothers, they were legends. Not because of the monsters they fought, but because of the love they lived. A love that was flexible, messy, hilarious, profound. A love that stretched, just like Jake did, around Finn's whole heart. As the years passed, their brotherhood took on new layers. What once was a relationship of protector and sidekick grew into a partnership of equals. Finn wasn't just tagging along anymore. He was leading missions, making hard calls, facing moral dilemmas that would have shaken even the wisest of heroes. And Jake followed not because he had to, but because he believed in him. That's the kind of growth that only happens when love is deep and unconditional. Jake knew that Finn needed space to become who he was meant to be, and Finn knew that no matter how far he ventured, Jake would never be far behind, watching, cheering, sometimes snoozing, but always there when it really counted. And oh, there were moments when it really counted. There was the time Finn lost his arm. A brutal, shocking moment in a fight where things spiraled beyond his control. Jake's face said it all, shock, sorrow, helplessness. But he didn't collapse. He didn't panic. He wrapped Finn in a stretchy embrace, held him tight, and whispered, "We'll figure it out, buddy, we always do." He never made it about himself, and he never turned Finn's pain into drama. He just showed up over and over with quiet strength. Sometimes that meant offering his body as a shield. Other times it meant offering his silence as a space for Finn to grieve. Jake's love didn't try to fix everything. It simply stood beside it. And that presence became part of Finn's compass. Even in moments when Jake wasn't around, when he was off with Lady Rainicorn or spending time with his pups, his influence lingered in Finn's choices. Finn would ask himself, what would Jake do? And the answer was usually something grounded, something kind, something weird but wise. Jake was his anchor, his soft place to land, his reality check wrapped in dad jokes and breakfast food. But their bond wasn't perfect, and that's what made it real. They argued, sometimes fiercely. They hurt each other's feelings. They got annoyed, frustrated, confused. Jake would drift into his own little world, leaving Finn feeling abandoned. Finn would push too hard, act before thinking, make Jake feel like an afterthought. But even in those tense moments, there was never a question of love. Because underneath the hurt was always this quiet knowing, we are in this for life. And sometimes, those fights brought them closer, forced them to say things out loud, made them understand each other better. Like the time Jake admitted that being a dad had changed him, made him less eager for non-stop adventuring. Finn didn't understand at first. He felt left behind, but eventually they found each other again, talked it out, hugged it out. Jake's ability to stretch wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. He made room for change, for growth, for Finn to become. And Finn returned that gift in kind. When Jake faced his own struggles, uncertainty about his purpose, fear of his own mortality, questions about his identity, Finn didn't shy away. He listened. He held space. He reminded Jake of his worth, not as a magical dog or a legendary hero, but as his brother. There's something deeply powerful about that kind of love. A love that has weathered monsters and heartbreak, alternate dimensions and existential dread, yet still finds joy in simple things, in bacon pancakes, in treehouse sleepovers, in inside jokes that no one else in the world would understand. You could see it in the way they looked at each other, soft, teasing, protective, proud. And in the way they said goodbye. That one goodbye when Jake moved on. Peacefully, naturally, gently. Even then, Finn didn't fall apart. Because Jake had given him everything he needed to stand tall. And because deep down, Finn knew Jake wasn't really gone. He was still with him. In every brave choice, every silly joke, every moment of grace. He was the echo in Finn's laugh, the rhythm in his step, the stretch in his heart. Because that's what brothers do. They don't just share adventures. They shape each other. And Jake and Finn, they shaped the very soul of who, together, always. It's hard to put into words the quiet strength of a bond like theirs. It wasn't just about surviving together. It was about living together. Laughing, stumbling, changing and growing in parallel. Always evolving, but never drifting apart. Even as the world around them shifted, kingdoms rose and fell, friends came and went. The sky sometimes turned pink for no reason. Jake and Finn stayed solid. Like a melody that never fades, just softens and slows as night draws near. And as Jake aged, gracefully, like a song reaching its final chorus, his relationship with Finn deepened. There was less need for action, more space for reflection, more time spent quietly watching clouds from a hammock, or reminiscing about their past escapades with gentle chuckles and nostalgic sighs. Finn, too, had matured. He wasn't the impulsive boy chasing monsters anymore. He had scars now, experience, wisdom. But he never lost his heart, never lost the sense of wonder that Jake had nurtured in him from the very beginning. Because that's what Jake gave him. Not just protection, not just companionship, but permission. Permission to be silly, to be scared, to be flawed, to be whole. It's a rare thing to be truly seen, especially by someone who's been with you from the beginning. But Jake saw Finn. In every form, every stage, every mood. And Finn, in turn, saw Jake. Not just as the stretchy, wisecracking hero everyone else saw, but as the deeply feeling, quietly noble soul he truly was. And then there came the end. Not with a bang, not with a battle. Just a quiet moment. Jake passed peacefully. No drama, no fear. Just a final stretch into the stars, a warm smile, and a deep knowing that everything was going to be okay. Because he had lived well, loved fully, and left behind a brother strong enough to carry on. When Finn learned of Jake's passing, he didn't crumble. He wept, of course, how could he not, but in that grief was also gratitude. Gratitude for the years, the memories, the everything. He sat by the river, staring into the sky, and whispered, "Thanks for everything, man." And in the rustle of the leaves, in the soft ripple of the water, he felt it. Jake was still there. In every stretch of the land, in every song of the wind, in every instinct that told Finn to pause, to laugh, to trust his gut. That was Jake's legacy, a living love, etched not into stone, but into soul. And even beyond time, beyond space, beyond the physical realm, they found each other again. In a realm of stars and light, they reunited. Not as heroes, not as legends, just as brothers. Jake greeted him with a smile, a wag, and a soft, "Took you long enough, dude." And Finn laughed, pure, unfiltered joy. Because in that moment, everything was whole again. Their story, you see, wasn't about beginnings or endings. It was about always. The kind of always that's born from years of shared breakfasts, inside jokes, and wordless support. The kind that lives in quiet glances and full-bellied laughs. The kind that isn't bound by time or space or even death. Finn and Jake taught us that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing each other, showing up, growing up, falling apart and finding your way back. They taught us that being a hero doesn't mean being perfect. Sometimes it just means being there, loving without conditions, believing without proof, stretching your heart wide enough to hold someone else's fears and still making room for joy. That was Jake. That was Finn. That was them. And in every bedtime story whispered under starlight, in every quiet moment, when you feel the world soften just a little, they're still there, side by side, brother and brother, forever. Jake the dog, the carefree adventurer, the stretchy sidekick, the legendary hero of Ooh, also had another title, one that didn't involve monster battles or treasure hunts, one that unfolded quietly between the folds of everyday life. Jake was a father, and not just any father, a father of five. 5 wildly unique, magically gifted, beautifully weird pups born from the union of Jake and his longtime partner, Lady Rainicorn. Now, to anyone unfamiliar with their dynamic, Jake and Lady's relationship might have seemed like a delightful enigma, a magical dog and a radiant, rainbow-colored being who mostly spoke Korean. How did that even work? But that was the magic of it. They didn't need to make sense to everyone else. They just made sense to each other. Their love was soft, playful, and built on mutual trust. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was consistent, gentle, unspoken in many ways, but always felt. When Jake became a dad, it wasn't with a grand declaration or a sudden transformation. It was more like a mellow breeze rolling in, subtle, natural. He didn't stop adventuring completely, but something shifted. His priorities began to bend, just like him, in new directions. And the pups? They were a sight to behold. TV, Charlie, Viola, Kim Kil-wan, and Jake Jr., each with their own personalities, powers, and quirks. Some looked more like their mom, others like their dad, but all of them carried a spark of something special, something familiar yet brand new. Jake didn't always know what he was doing. He wasn't the kind of dad with a detailed plan or a color-coded calendar, but he showed up. He cared, he tried. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing a parent can do. There's something tender about watching someone so laid back embrace the chaos of parenting with open arms. Jake didn't try to control his kids. He gave them space, lots of space, to be who they were, whether they wanted to become musicians, explorers, thinkers, or even avoid their magical inheritance altogether. Jake supported them. He wasn't overbearing, he wasn't perfect, but he loved them deeply. Take Kim Kil-wan, for example. The most serious of the pups, he grew up quickly, too quickly in Jake's eyes. He valued responsibility, structure, adulthood. At one point, he even challenged Jake's lifestyle, questioning whether his father's laid-back attitude was a form of negligence. That conversation was a turning point. It hurt Jake, deeply. But instead of lashing out, Jake listened. He reflected. He didn't get defensive. He saw his son for who he was becoming, a thoughtful, independent being carving out his own path. And though it stung, Jake understood. That's what good parents do, isn't it? They recognize when it's time to stop steering and start watching, to witness the unfolding of a soul they helped nurture, but never owned. Jake's approach to fatherhood was all about presence, not perfection. He didn't have the answers. He made mistakes. He took naps at the wrong times. Sometimes he missed events or got distracted by adventures. But when it mattered, when his kids truly needed him, he always showed up. In quiet ways, too. A stretch around the shoulders when someone was feeling low. A pancake breakfast just because. A goofy song to ease the tension. A reminder, spoken or unspoken, that no matter how far they roamed, they would always have a home in him. And perhaps the most profound thing Jake ever offered his children wasn't advice, it was example. He modeled a way of living that was soft but strong, open but grounded. He showed them that magic didn't just exist in spells and battles, but in laughter, in love, in slowing down to watch the sunrise. He showed them that being a hero doesn't mean being fearless. It means showing up with your heart stretched wide. As Jake's pups grew older, their personalities became even more distinct, and Jake, ever the laid-back dreamer, learned how to adapt his love to fit each one of them. He didn't expect them to be copies of him or Lady Rainicorn. He didn't put them into neat little boxes or assign them destinies. Instead, he offered each child something precious, freedom with a foundation. Take Jake Jr., for example. Confident, daring, fiercely independent. She was a natural-born leader and wanted to carve her name into the world's story on her own terms. And Jake? He didn't hold her back. He didn't worry about her being too bold or too headstrong. He watched with pride, knowing she had inherited the best parts of both her parents. Then there was TV, who was quieter and more sensitive. He was the kind of kid who liked to observe, to listen, to curl up with a good show and just be. Jake understood him, too, because Jake knew what it meant to be dreamy, to have an inner world that hummed a little differently. He connected with TV on a wavelength made of soft silences, inside jokes, and patient companionship. Viola, Charlie, Kim Kil-wan, each of them carried a facet of the bond Jake and Lady shared. And Jake, ever the malleable dad, found his shape in their lives. He stretched to fit the needs of the moment, not out of obligation, but out of love. One of Jake's most tender qualities was his willingness to step back. There's something not every parent can do. But Jake, he understood that clinging too tightly to your children doesn't protect them. It stifles them. So he let go, little by little, with an open heart. There's something poignant about watching a magical being with limitless potential realize that the greatest journey wasn't out there in distant lands, but in the living room, surrounded by his family. No enchanted forest, no mystical artifact, no villain's lair ever brought him the quiet joy he felt when one of his kids cracked a joke or leaned against him after a long day. And still, Jake's fatherhood wasn't confined to his biological children. He was a mentor to many. To Finn, of course, who was more than just a brother, he was Jake's first child in many ways. Finn, who learned how to laugh in the face of danger, how to dance through sorrow, how to find light in absurdity, all from Jake. Their adventures may have looked chaotic to others, but they were layered with love, trust, and lessons in how to live. Jake was also a steady presence for BMO, for Shelby, for the countless quirky beings who called the treehouse home. He offered a kind of emotional sanctuary, a quiet warmth that radiated through his stretchy limbs and sleepy voice. He wasn't a disciplinarian. He wasn't a hero with a code of conduct or a rigorous routine. He was just there, consistently, lovingly, fully. And that presence, so calm, so accepting, became a beacon for others. In his interactions with Lady Rainicorn, we see another dimension of Jake's parenting, partnership. He never tried to dominate their relationship. He wasn't the dad in charge. He respected Lady's voice, her culture, her language. Even when he didn't understand every word, he listened with his heart. They were a team, and their children knew it. There was no traditional mold, no normal to follow, but there was deep respect and even deeper affection. Their quiet moments together, shared meals, strolls through playful teasing, were the roots of the family tree. Sometimes Jake got things wrong. Sometimes he showed up late or stretched himself too thin. Sometimes he spaced out, lost in his own musing. But when he realized he'd let someone down, he didn't make excuses. He made it right. There's something undeniably human about that. Magical dog or not, Jake was deeply relatable. He worried, he wondered. He got tired, he messed up. But he also forgave easily. He healed quickly. He grew with every mistake. In many ways, Jake's journey as a father mirrors the journey we all take. Whether we raise children, care for others, or try to love well in our own way, it's a dance between control and surrender, between wanting to protect and knowing when to let go. And Jake, he danced that dance beautifully. Even as his children scattered across the land, following their own stars, Jake never faded from their lives. He'd pop in now and then, share a snack, give a word of encouragement, then vanish into the horizon like the mellow breeze he always was. Because Jake's fatherhood wasn't about holding on. It was about showing up, again and again, until his presence became a part of his children's internal compass. And that's the thing about love like Jake's. It doesn't vanish when you leave the room. It lingers, like a favorite song, like the warmth of the sun on your skin, like the quiet confidence that no matter where you go, there's someone out there who gets you completely. Jake's parenting journey wasn't linear. It ebbed and flowed, much like his own body. And maybe that's what made him so suited to the role. His flexibility wasn't just magical, it was emotional. Jake could stretch to meet the moment, no matter how strange, messy, or bittersweet. When his pups became more independent, Jake didn't resist. He didn't cling to the early days or try to freeze time. Instead, he leaned into the shift. He visited when invited. He offered advice only when asked. He knew that his job wasn't to shape their path. It was to be there as they carved their own. Kim Kil-Wan, the most grounded and pragmatic of the bunch, even built a life that looked radically different from his father's. At one point, he bought up the treehouse to redevelop it into apartments, worried about his dad's carefree lifestyle and whether Jake would ever grow up. That moment could have created a rift, and for a time it did. But Jake didn't explode. He didn't disown. He listened, really listened, to his son's concerns, and instead of defending his lifestyle with pride or denial, he responded with something powerful, understanding. Jake knew his son was just trying to make sense of a world that often felt chaotic, and if part of that meant questioning his dad's choices, then so be it. The two eventually reconciled, not because one won the argument, but because Jake modeled something rare. He let his love be bigger than his ego, and that love created ripples. You could see it in the way his kids turned out, not perfect, but whole. Not without struggles, but equipped with empathy. They weren't clones of Jake or Lady. They were their own wild mix of personality, experience, and inherited kindness. Jake's influence was like a song you hear in childhood. You might forget the lyrics, but the melody stays with you. It becomes a background rhythm to your choices, your instincts, your values. Even when Jake wasn't physically present, his children carried that melody. And Jake, oh Jake, he was proud. Not loudly, not in speeches or grand gestures, but in soft smiles, in the way he talked about them, in the way his eyes lit up when he mentioned their names. He supported them from afar when needed. Sometimes that support was direct, like offering help during moments of crisis. Other times it was quieter, just being available, being there, even if it meant just hanging out in the background until the right moment came. Jake's family life also showed us something essential about relationships. They don't have to be perfect to be meaningful. He and Lady Rainicorn had their differences. She spoke a different language. They had different energies, different rhythms, but their bond endured. They weren't constantly tangled up in each other's lives, and they didn't try to force a single mold. Their relationship was a slow-burning flame, not a raging fire. It had stability, grace, and the kind of deep trust that allowed for space, for growth. Jake never tried to define Lady's role, and she didn't try to box him in either. They raised their children with mutual respect, gentle laughter, and a shared understanding that love doesn't need to be loud to be strong. Sometimes Jake would just lie on the hill outside the treehouse, watching clouds roll by, thinking about his pups. You could almost hear his thoughts drifting like the wind, memories of tiny paws, of first words, of little drawings taped to the fridge. He never made a big deal of those moments, but they mattered to him, deeply. And when he spoke of them, it was always with a mix of nostalgia and pride, as if he understood that time couldn't be held. It could only be honored. Jake's identity as a father wasn't separate from who he was as a person. It wasn't a role he put on like a costume. It was woven into his being, into the way he laughed, the way he offered advice, the way he stretched himself, literally and emotionally, to care for others. He didn't need to be the strict parent, the overprotective guardian, or the high-achieving dad. He just needed to be Jake. That was enough. And isn't that the heart of true parenthood? Not trying to be everything, but being yourself fully and offering that self with love. Jake showed that fatherhood isn't always about big lessons or dramatic sacrifices. Sometimes it's about the small things, the way you make someone feel safe just by being near, the way you listen without judgment, the way you allow those you love to fail, to try again, to figure it out in their own time. Even toward the later seasons of Adventure Time, when Jake began to explore more about his own origins, his identity, and his place in the universe, his role as a father remained a grounding force. His reflections were more tender, more nuanced. He started to see time differently, not as a race, but as a gift. And in those quieter, older moments, Jake began passing his wisdom along not just to his children, but to Finn, to BMO, to anyone who sought his presence. His words weren't heavy. They were often silly. But beneath the surface, they carried something true, something lasting. As time passed in the land of Ooh and adventures gave way to reflection, Jake's role as a father matured into something even more powerful, legacy. Not legacy in the traditional grandiose sense. There were no monuments built in his name, no epic songs of conquest. Instead, his legacy lived in the quiet ways he shaped those around him. It lived in the way Kim Kil-Wan treated his own child, with that same balance of freedom and care Jake once gave him. It lived in the creative spark that danced in Viola's eyes, the empathetic heart of TV, the fire in Jake Jr., and the spiritual intuition of Charlie. Jake didn't pass down wealth or titles. He passed down values. He taught them that it's okay to laugh at life, even when things are falling apart. He taught them that you don't need to be perfect to be lovable. He taught them that love isn't always loud. It can be soft, weird, stretchy, and still sacred. Even after Jake's death, we see the quiet echo of his fatherhood reverberating. In the epilogue, when he and Finn reunite in the afterlife, there's this warm, knowing energy between them. No panic, no unfinished business, just peace. It's as if Jake had lived his life so fully, loved so completely, that he didn't carry regret into the great beyond. And that, perhaps, is the final lesson Jake offers as a father, not just to his children, but to all of us. That showing up with sincerity day after day matters. That presence is more powerful than perfection. And that the love we offer in small, steady doses often outlives us. Jake never needed to be a traditional hero. His superpowers weren't just his stretchy limbs or magical genetics. His real strength was his emotional openness, his willingness to be silly and vulnerable, to tell his kids they were awesome, to cry if he needed to ask for help, to be real. In a world filled with chaos and colorful absurdity, Jake was an anchor. Not a heavy one that dragged people down, but a buoyant one. He kept those he loved afloat, even when he didn't have all the answers, even when things got weird or sad or scary. And maybe that's what made him such an unforgettable father. Not that he had some master plan for parenting, but that he loved so freely, so openly, and with such grace. We often think of magic as something flashy, spells, transformations, glowing relics. But Jake reminded us that the truest magic is invisible. It's the magic of listening to someone when they're hurting, the magic of laughing with your child until your sides hurt, the magic of holding someone close and saying, "I'm here." Jake's parenting wasn't flawless. It was human, honest, forgiving. And it's that honesty that makes him resonate with so many. Because at the end of the day, being a good parent isn't about being right all the time. It's about being present. About growing with your kids, not ahead of them. About saying, "I don't know the way, but I'll walk with you." And that's what Jake did, over and over again. Whether it was through his warm advice, his goofy jokes, or the way he plopped down next to someone who needed company, Jake chose love, even when it was hard, even when it meant letting go. And his children? They thrived. Not because Jake controlled them, but because he believed in them. That belief, that stretchy, expansive love, became the foundation of their lives. A foundation that would carry them through loss, growth, and everything in between. So as we leave this segment of Jake's life, picture him not in battle, not chasing a villain, or solving some grand mystery, but sitting under the stars, one arm around Lady Rainicorn, the other casually holding a sandwich, listening to one of his kids tell a story from their day. The world could wait. Because Jake the dog had already found the greatest adventure of all. Family. When you first meet Jake the dog, you might think you've got him figured out. He's the goofy one, the napper, the guy who brings the tunes and snacks to a battle. He stretches, he sings, he cooks bacon pancakes, and that might feel like the whole story. But if you listen closely, really closely, you'll hear something else in the rhythm of his voice, something softer, wiser, slower. Jake the dog is a philosopher in disguise. Not the kind with a scroll or a podium, not the kind who tries to dazzle you with logic or long debates. No, Jake's philosophy is the kind you find lying under a tree at sunset, half awake, muttering thoughts that sound silly at first, until they stay with you. Take, for instance, one of his many dreamlike declarations. Dude, sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. It's said with a shrug, a laugh, maybe even while eating a sandwich. But that sentence holds a universe, a gentle, open-hearted worldview where failure is just the beginning of becoming. In that one moment, Jake gives permission to try, to fall, to grow. His life isn't a series of epic battles or carefully constructed plans. Jake moves with the flow of the world. He trusts his gut. He follows the music. And that's not laziness, it's faith. A kind of spiritual ease that many philosophers spend lifetimes chasing. Because Jake understands something fundamental. The world is weird, and that's okay. He doesn't try to fight the weirdness. He leans into it. He befriends it. He naps through it if necessary. This relaxed presence makes him a balm to the high-strung energy of others. When Finn spirals into self-doubt, Jake offers groundedness. When situations turn absurd or frightening, he responds not with panic, but with a kind of cosmic, wild, and then adapts. That's not apathy, that's acceptance. And acceptance for Jake isn't the same as giving up. It's the recognition that control is an illusion, and that life, in all its strange patterns, will continue whether we stress or smile. So why not smile? Why not laugh? Why not stretch into the shape of a motorcycle and ride the chaos like a wave? Yet underneath that playfulness is a soul that wonders. Jake often reflects on the nature of time, death, memory, and dreams. In the episode The New Frontier, he dreams of a comet and becomes convinced it's a sign. His time to die is near, and instead of being afraid, Jake is ready, curious even. He talks about the end not as a dark, dreadful thing, but as part of the adventure, as something natural, something to lean into, not run from. I'm not scared, he says gently. I'm looking forward to whatever happens. That's not a joke. That's enlightenment. Jake's philosophy is deeply tied to his dreams. His dream world is vivid and meaningful. It's where he often meets versions of himself, versions of others, symbolic echoes of real-world feelings. In these spaces, Jake isn't just a sidekick or a comic relief character. He becomes a traveler of the mind and spirit. And he's been to places few others dare to go. not just physically, but internally. He doesn't compartmentalize his experiences. He absorbs them. He lets them change him. One of the most profound moments in Jake's journey comes when he faces the idea of death directly, not in battle, but through gentle stillness. He meets his own reincarnation, Shoko's tiger, and instead of resisting the mystery, he welcomes it. This is a dog who's been everything from a baby criminal to a magical father of 5 to a cosmic noodle, and through it all, he learns. Not with textbooks, not with lectures, with living. And what he learns he passes on, not in commands, but in soft-spoken truths. He tells Finn to slow down, to breathe, to question things, but not get lost in the questions. He doesn't offer rigid answers. Jake's way is not about certainty, it's about ease and uncertainty, peace and paradox. He seems to know that meaning isn't always something we chase. Sometimes it comes when we stop chasing, when we rest, when we float. And that's the heart of Jake's quiet wisdom, a belief that the universe, in all its confusion, still holds harmony, if we're willing to listen. Jake's philosophy isn't just something he speaks, it's something he lives. You can see it in the way he eats a pie in the middle of a crisis, or takes a nap during a high-stakes mission, not out of laziness, but because he trusts that clarity often comes when we stop trying so hard to force it. There's a kind of quiet rebellion in that, a refusal to let the noise of the world pull him away from his own rhythm. It's as if Jake tuned his heart to a different frequency, one that most people can't hear until they slow down enough to notice. He never pushes that frequency on anyone. He just hums it softly, hoping others will find their own harmony along the way. He also has a remarkable ability to embrace contradiction. Jake can be childlike and deeply mature. He can act like a clown and then drop a line that sounds like it came from an ancient monk. He's silly but never shallow. He's lighthearted but not dismissive. He doesn't avoid hard truths. He just meets them with softness instead of force. That duality is especially visible in how he navigates change. Jake has lived many lives in one. He's been a wild adventurer, a loyal brother, a romantic partner, a father, and a kind of spiritual traveler. Through each chapter, he doesn't cling to a fixed identity. He flows, he stretches, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And that's what makes Jake's wisdom so real. It's earned. It doesn't come from a place of superiority or detachment. It comes from having lived through love, loss, joy, confusion, and uncertainty, and deciding to remain open anyway. One of the most poignant examples of this comes in the episode Is That You?, when Jake and Finn face the cosmic echoes of Prismo's alternate timelines. The narrative becomes surreal, layered with dream logic, memory loops, and existential tension. But Jake, ever the dream walker, moves through these dimensions with a kind of gentle surrender. He doesn't demand answers, he just follows the feeling, trusts his instincts, honors the moment. He doesn't seek control, he seeks connection. In those spaces, Jake becomes more than just a magical dog. He becomes a symbol of how to move through the unknown, with a calm heart and an open mind. In many ways, he embodies the idea that life is not a puzzle to solve, but a mystery to experience. And it's not that Jake has no fears. He does. He fears losing people he loves. He fears not being enough for his children. He sometimes fears the big, cosmic unknown. But he never lets those fears dictate his actions. Instead, he meets them with curiosity. What if the end isn't the end? He once muses, lying in a hammock, eyes half closed. What if it's just the next weird beginning? Jake doesn't seek to outrun the strange or explain it away. He lets the weirdness in, He breaks bread with it. He makes a song out of it. That acceptance, the ability to say, this is weird and scary, but I'm still here, is what gives Jake his spiritual core. In another episode, Together Again, we see Jake in the afterlife, a place where souls wander in an eternal, dreamy haze. And even there, Jake is not troubled. He's at home. It's like he's been preparing for this kind of stillness his whole life. When Finn tries to rescue him, Jake is calm. Not because he doesn't love his brother, but because he's found peace with the cycle of existence. Finn begs him to come back, and for a moment, Jake considers it. But ultimately, he chooses to remain. Not from detachment, but from trust that life, death, and rebirth are all part of the same dance, that everything's connected. Jake's spiritual strength doesn't look like intensity or discipline. It looks like a long, deep breath, like forgiveness, like knowing that you don't have to fight everything, that sometimes just being is enough. And that belief spreads to everyone he loves. When others around him are lost in doubt or tangled in fear, Jake shows them how to come back to center, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with a song, sometimes with a quiet moment of holding space. He doesn't fix people. He reminds them of their own inner peace. He stretches not just across battlefields or into crazy shapes, but into the emotional gaps between people. He fills in the silence with warmth. He bridges distances with presence. He's the gentle glue that holds his world together. There's something remarkably healing about the way Jake interacts with others. He doesn't rush people to clarity. He doesn't lecture or scold or try to fix what's broken. Instead, he sits beside you in your confusion, in your fear, in your mess, and simply exists with you. That quiet companionship is something even the wisest characters in Ooh learn from. Princess Bubblegum, for instance, a character of pure intellect and control, often finds herself humbled by Jake's laid-back approach. She's the planner, the thinker, the strategist. Jake is the dreamer, the feeler, the gut instinct guide. And yet when she listens to him, really listens, she often finds the kind of truth her logic alone can't reach. Jake has that effect on people. He reminds them that they don't need all the answers before they take a step, that it's okay to not know, to laugh when things fall apart, and to sit still when the world is begging you to rush. In a land full of magic and monsters, Jake's greatest power might just be presence. You can see this most beautifully in how he supports Finn. Finn, for all his heroism, is constantly grappling with questions of identity, purpose, and morality. He wants to do good, to be strong, to make a difference. But those desires often lead him into spirals of pressure and self-doubt. Jake never pushes him away from those feelings. He doesn't try to make them disappear. He just reminds Finn, again and again, to return to his heart. One of Jake's most iconic lines to Finn is deceptively simple. You're getting hung up on imaginary problems. You gotta focus on what's real, man. And what's real to Jake is not the abstract worries or imagined futures. It's the now, the person in front of you, the breath you're taking, the song you're humming. He's not saying don't care. He's saying don't collapse under things that haven't happened yet. Jake's brand of philosophy is grounded in simplicity, but that simplicity is earned. It's the result of choosing trust over control, laughter over worry, softness over armor. It's why his words land with such quiet power. Even in romantic relationships, Jake brings the same energy. His bond with Lady Rainicorn isn't filled with grand declarations or dramatic turmoil. It's quiet, quirky, enduring. It's based on mutual respect and an unspoken ease. Jake's love isn't loud, it's loyal. He shows up. He plays with their kids. He learns a few phrases in Korean. He makes space for her weirdness, and she makes space for his. Their relationship isn't perfect, but it's whole. It reflects Jake's core truth. You don't have to understand everything completely to love it fully. And isn't that, in many ways, the heart of all philosophy? Jake doesn't search for perfection. He embraces wholeness, messy, evolving, incomplete wholeness. He's not trying to make life tidy. He's trying to make it true, to live in alignment with his feelings, his instincts, his values. That's why even when he's cracking jokes or turning into a giant foot, there's always something deeper happening underneath. Jake is present. He's listening. He's watching the emotional weather of the room, and when someone needs it, he gently offers shelter. Sometimes that looks like a pun. Sometimes it looks like holding someone's hand. Sometimes it looks like giving them the space to cry without judgment. And then there are the dreams. Jake's connection to dreams goes beyond the whimsical. It's almost mystical. His dreamscape is a place where he communes with truths that can't be spoken directly, where past and future collapse into symbols, and his mind becomes a playground of possibility. In these dream worlds, Jake doesn't just visit ideas, he feels them, lives them, learns from them. When he dreams of a future where he dies, he accepts it. When he meets his alternate selves, like the kaleidoscopic Jake multiverse, he doesn't panic. He smiles, he adapts, he listens. These dream Jakes are fragments of his identity, scattered across time and space, and instead of resisting them, he embraces each one. In doing so, Jake shows us that we are not one self, but many. That growth doesn't mean discarding our past versions, but integrating them, honoring who we've been while staying open to who we might become. He doesn't seek to master life. He seeks to merge with it. And so, in a world of quests and crowns, dungeons and demons, prophecies and potions, Jake's greatest magic is that he's never trying to be more than he is. He knows that who he is, right now, sleepy and curious, loyal and weird, is enough. And that's why his philosophy endures, not because it dazzles, but because it comforts. It wraps around you like a warm blanket and whispers, "You're okay. This is weird, but it's okay." Jake's philosophy doesn't end when the episode fades out or the battle ends. It lingers. It hangs in the air like the smell of fresh pancakes or the sound of a ukulele in the distance. You carry it with you, sometimes without even realizing it. Because Jake's outlook isn't just about peace, it's about permission. Permission to not know, to be a little lost, to feel too much, to laugh when you're supposed to cry and cry when no one else understands why. He gives you that quiet nod, that unspoken, "You're doing just fine, buddy," and it means everything. And his philosophy, subtle as it may seem, touches every corner of Ooh. You see it ripple outward like gentle waves. It shapes how Finn learns to forgive himself, how Princess Bubblegum allows herself to soften, how even beings like the Ice King begin to remember the importance of connection and kindness. Jake isn't trying to save the world. He's just being himself. And somehow, in doing so, he makes everything a little lighter. In one of the most touching moments in Together Again, when Finn reunites with Jake in the afterlife, their bond transcends life and death. There, beyond time and fear, Jake simply is. Radiant, centered, peaceful. He doesn't fight to return to the world. He offers love, and from that love, transformation begins. He tells Finn, "It's okay, man. You go ahead." And in that moment, it becomes clear. Jake's wisdom isn't about clinging. It's about releasing, letting go with love, trusting that what's real, truly real, doesn't need to be held so tightly. It will stay. It will echo. Jake's legacy isn't in grand monuments or legendary prophecies. It's in the small things, the weird dreams, the lazy afternoons, the gentle reminders to breathe. It's in how you talk to yourself on hard days, how you sit with your feelings without judgment, how you find joy in the ridiculous and meaning in the mundane. He teaches us that peace isn't something we chase. It's something we allow. There's one line tucked away in a quiet moment that almost feels like Jake's thesis statement. Dude, sucking at something is the first step to being sort of good at something. It's silly, almost laughable. But it's real. It's an entire worldview wrapped in a hug and a chuckle. It means you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be wise or powerful or strong all the time. You just have to show up, be curious, try. It's this humility, this gentle wisdom, that elevates Jake beyond being just the comic relief or the loyal sidekick. He becomes something more, a symbol of radical ease, of unhurried joy, of living fully right here without needing to prove a thing. And maybe that's what makes him such a powerful philosopher. He doesn't build temples or write treatises. He makes breakfast. He takes naps. He listens when you need to talk and holds space when there's nothing left to say. He teaches by being soft in a world that often rewards hardness, by being silly when the stakes are high, by being present when others are scattered, and by loving without needing to be understood. Jake reminds us that life isn't a riddle to solve, it's a melody to hum along to, even if you don't know all the words. So if you ever feel overwhelmed, lost in the noise, or unsure of who you're supposed to be, think of Jake. Think of him floating on a cloud, belly up to the sun, humming to himself. Think of him playing the viola just because it makes him happy. Think of him saying, "I love you, dude," without fanfare or expectation. Let that be your anchor. Let that be your philosophy. Because maybe being a philosopher isn't about having all the answers. Maybe it's just about staying soft, staying open, and remembering that sometimes all you need is a nap, a song, and someone to sit with you while the world spins on. And with that, the chapter of Jake the Philosopher drifts gently into the breeze, an invisible thread in the quilt of ooh, warm and worn and full of heart. Jake's final journey begins, not with a bang or a dramatic goodbye, but with a feeling, faint like the turning of a page you didn't notice was coming. As time ripples forward, life begins to shift. Finn grows older. Their travels become less chaotic, more deliberate. The world doesn't slow down, but it deepens. And in this gentle unfolding, Jake starts to move differently, too. He becomes quieter, more contemplative. Not in a sad way, but like someone who's watching the sunset, knowing another will rise, but still savoring the colors of this one. We don't see a single moment when Jake passes. Adventure Time never puts it in sharp focus. And maybe that's the point. Jake doesn't leave the world in a blaze of glory. He simply flows on. Like a song coming to a close, like a wave folding back into the sea. And when we meet him again, and together again, he's waiting. In a realm beyond time and form, Jake is exactly himself, radiant, relaxed, not aged or worn, but free. He's been resting in the 50th dead world, a peaceful afterlife for souls who've let go of all attachments. What's so striking is how whole he feels, not desperate to return, not clinging to old memories. Jake is at peace. Finn, on the other hand, has traveled through layer after layer of the afterlife searching for Jake, driven by love, by that unshakable bond they've always shared. And when they're finally reunited, the hug they share doesn't feel like a rescue. It feels like a reunion that was always destined. There's something profoundly emotional about seeing Jake so serene. It's as if all his wisdom, all his easy laughter, all his belief in letting life flow, it all culminated in this one quiet truth. He was ready. Not because he stopped loving the world, but because he trusted it enough to leave it in good hands. He trusted Finn. He trusted their family. He trusted the rhythm of life itself. Even in death, Jake doesn't give Finn a map or a mission. He doesn't burden him with tasks or warnings. Instead, he listens. He loves. He reminds Finn of who he is. And then, perhaps, most beautifully of all, he chooses to go with him. Even though Jake has already achieved the highest peace, has earned the right to stay in paradise, he lets it go. He says goodbye to his serene afterlife, just to walk beside Finn one more time. Because that's who Jake is. Even death can't quiet his loyalty. That act, subtle and tender, says more about Jake's legacy than any monument could. His legacy isn't built on conquest or fame. It's built on presence, on love, on always showing up when it matters most, even when no one expects you to. And so they walk into the next adventure together, not as saviors or heroes, but as brothers. It's one of the most emotionally resonant moments in Adventure Time, and perhaps in all of animation, not because of what happens, but because of how it feels. It feels like closure, like comfort, like truth. It teaches us that endings don't have to be tragic to be powerful. That saying goodbye doesn't mean forgetting. That someone's presence can remain even when they're gone. Jake's story doesn't end. It simply becomes part of everything. Like his stretchy powers, his essence expands beyond the frame. You can feel him in every moment of kindness, every laid-back chuckle, every choice to stay soft when the world tells you to harden. His influence continues, rippling through the generations. His kids, strange and wonderful, carry fragments of him. BMO still hums songs they once shared. Finn carries his voice in the quiet parts of his heart, especially when he's unsure of what to do. And the land of Ooh, in all its chaos and color, still echoes with his energy. You can almost hear it. Jake's laugh on the breeze, his sleepy wisdom tangled in the leaves. Jake's legacy, though unspoken in monuments or fanfare, grows richer through memory and meaning. It doesn't echo loudly. It hums softly, like a lullaby you didn't know you remembered until it finds you again on a quiet night. And perhaps that's the most fitting tribute to a soul like Jake's. His children, each peculiar, each carrying some fragment of his energy, walk their own strange and winding paths. There's TV with his slight aloofness and tender heart, trying to find structure in a world his dad always told him to roll with. There's Viola, the artistic soul, gentle and brave in her own way, and Kim Kil-Wan, practical and driven, a little more serious than Jake ever was, but with the same desire to build a better life for his family. Though Jake wasn't always the most conventional father, he napped more than he lectured, offered goofy songs instead of strict lessons. His love ran deep. His kids carry that with them. Even when he wasn't around, his belief in them, his steady, unconditional pride, was like a warm light always on in the distance. And in Finn, Jake left the most vivid imprint of all. Finn was once a wide-eyed child chasing adventure, raw with emotion and uncertain of the world. But beside Jake, he learned patience, learned how to fail, how to laugh at himself, how to sit with fear without letting it take over. Jake didn't just fight monsters with Finn. He helped Finn wrestle with himself, with guilt, with heartbreak, with growing up. And because of Jake, Finn didn't become hardened. He became whole. That kind of influence, that deep emotional shaping, is rare. It's the kind you don't even notice happening until years later, when you're sitting quietly somewhere, realizing how the voice in your head sounds an awful lot like someone you loved. Jake's voice lives on like that. Not just in Finn's heart, but in ours, too. It speaks in moments when we pause to let life be weird without needing to fix it. When we let a friend vent without giving advice. When we choose to take the silly path instead of the straight one, because it feels more alive. Jake's philosophy of letting go is part of his legacy, too. Not just letting go of anger or sadness, but letting go of the need to always be right, of the illusion of control. He taught us to float, to trust that things work out, not because they have to, but because they can, if we loosen our grip just a little. And through that light touch, he helped us hold on to what really matters. It's funny how the smallest things stick with you. The way Jake played the viola, not well, but joyfully. The way he made up songs on the spot as if music was just something that spilled out of him without effort. The way he always seemed to know when to say something wise and when to just be quiet and let you cry. There's wisdom in not always having the answer, in just being present. And Jake was present. He wasn't always punctual or organized or even entirely aware of what was going on, but emotionally, he showed up, again and again, with a grin and an open heart. That presence, that devotion without pressure, is what so many of us long for. It's a comfort, really, to imagine Jake out there, somewhere in the afterlife, sprawled on a cloud, arms behind his head, belly rising and falling with slow, contented breaths. Maybe he's humming something. Maybe he's dreaming in pictures. Maybe he's just resting. Not because he gave up, but because he gave enough. And still, if someone he loved needed him, even now, you get the sense that he'd stretch his way right back into their life with a chuckle and a, hey, man, because legacy isn't about being remembered loudly. It's about being remembered softly. It's in the smile someone gets when they recall a joke you told. The way they sit a little differently because of something you once said. The courage they find in themselves because you believed in them before they knew how to believe in themselves. Jake's legacy lives in the people he loved, in their better days, in their gentle choices, in the way they carry the world just a little lighter because he was in it. And maybe that's the gift of someone like Jake. He didn't try to change the world. He just lived in it, fully, freely, lovingly, and the world changed around him. As we drift further into this quiet stretch of Jake's story, we realize something subtle. His legacy isn't frozen in time. It's still breathing, still moving. It evolves with those who remember him. Think of BMO. This tiny, playful robot who shared so many adventures with Jake carries him in memory and mood. BMO sometimes talks to the air as if Jake were still around, giggling at jokes only the two of them might understand. It's not just nostalgia, it's something deeper. It's BMO keeping that energy alive. Jake's silliness, his warmth, his strange, looping way of looking at things sideways. Even Marceline, hardened by centuries of change and loss, reflects differently when Jake is brought up. There's a quiet respect in her. She's seen kingdoms rise and fall, lovers come and go. But Jake, he was a constant, a comfort, a rare soul who never needed anything from you except for your weird, honest self. In that way, Jake's legacy is one of acceptance. He didn't ask people to be better than they were. He just saw them. And that kind of seeing, that deep, loving gaze, it heals things. And then there's Lady Rainicorn. The love they shared was soft and lived in. No big speeches, no flashy romance arcs. Just two beings who understood each other, even across languages and species. Their connection was pure emotion, pure comfort. Theirs is a love that moved beneath the surface, quiet but strong. Their time together shaped Jake too. It grounded him, reminded him that adventure is wonderful, but home is sacred. And when he became a father, we saw a new layer to him. Not a transformation, but a deepening, a mellowing. He wasn't perfect, and he never pretended to be. But he showed up in his own way, offbeat, scattered, but loving with his whole heart. Jake never pushed people to grow. He simply made space for them to. And what more profound gift is there than that? It's why, even in the far-off future, even in Obsidian or the closing echoes of Adventure Time, distant land, the world of ooh feels shaped by his fingerprints. You can't walk through that world, real or imagined, without feeling him. The dreamlike physics of his stretchy powers, the music he hummed, the gentle absurdity he brought into every moment, it lingers. Not as a ghost, but as a mood, a vibration. And if we zoom even further out, outside the bounds of the cartoon itself into our world, Jake's legacy doesn't stop there. For fans, Jake was the friend you wished you had. Or maybe the friend you were, chill, messy, loyal, funny, in a way that sometimes surprised even yourself. He was a reminder that you didn't have to have everything figured out to be full of love and meaning. He taught us that it's okay to relax. The wisdom doesn't have to sound like a sermon. It can sound like a dad joke or a sleepy sigh or a silly song about pancakes. And in a world that often moves too fast, demands too much, and praises overachievement, Jake offered something radical. The permission to just be. To nap when you're tired. To love what you love. To say nah. To things that don't feel right. To believe in the flow of things, even when you don't have a plan. He was the embodiment of the belief that the universe has your back, and that even if it doesn't, you'll figure it out. So when people think of Jake now, whether they're children watching Adventure Time for the first time, or adults revisiting it for the comfort it brings, what they remember isn't just the laughs. It's the feeling, a warm, sleepy feeling, like curling up in a sunny spot on the floor, like hearing someone you trust say, "It's okay, you're doing great," even when you're not sure you are. Jake didn't teach through lessons. He taught through living. And his legacy isn't made of facts or plot points. It's made of the softness he left in people's hearts. Maybe that's why he's still with us. Because legacies like his don't fade. They settle. Like dust on a sunbeam. Like stories in an old song. Like dreams in the space between sleep and waking. Jake's final moments, at least the ones we're shown, aren't about fanfare or glory. They're about peace. He doesn't go out in battle. He doesn't make a grand exit. Instead, he slips into the next realm with a kind of grace that's rare in storytelling. One moment he's lying there, old and content, surrounded by love. The next, he's part of something bigger. Still smiling, still Jake, just beyond. And even that departure feels right. Because Jake was never afraid of change. He embraced it, rolled with it. He was the kind of soul who would say, "Hey man, it's all good," even as the world shifted under his feet. He trusted the flow. And maybe that's what his story was always about. Not the fights, not the magic, Not even the friendships, but trust. In others. In the universe. In the idea that love, when given freely, leaves a mark that doesn't fade. Finn's final journey to reconnect with Jake and together again is more than just a reunion. It's a meditation on love, grief, and the eternal thread that binds us. Even in death, their bond remains strong, because true bonds, real soul-level connections, don't break. They stretch. Just like Jake. And when Finn finally finds Jake relaxing under the cosmic tree, it's as if no time has passed at all. Jake welcomes him with that classic grin, that sleepy-eyed peace. Not surprised, not overjoyed, just content, as if he always knew they'd find each other again. Their hug in that moment isn't just for them, it's for us, for every viewer who's ever loved and lost, for everyone who's said goodbye to someone and hoped somehow that goodbye wouldn't be forever. Jake shows us that it isn't, that love lingers, that connection lasts, that what we share with others becomes part of the fabric of the universe itself. And then he lets go again. Because even in eternity, Jake understands something beautiful. Things don't have to last forever to matter. As the stars swirl and the soft music plays, we're left not with sadness, but with serenity. We don't have to hold on too tightly. We don't have to understand everything. We can rest, because Jake did. And in doing so, he left behind something gentler than answers, a feeling, a sense that everything somehow is okay, that even the strangest paths, the most unexpected lives, the weirdest adventures, all lead somewhere meaningful, somewhere warm, somewhere where we can stretch out, take a deep breath, and just be. So as this journey draws to a close, and you lay there with your eyes growing heavier, know this. Jake the dog isn't gone. Not really. He's in the quiet courage of people who try again after falling down. He's in the goofy, wonderful hearts of those who love without judgment. He's in every nap you've ever taken that felt like a little gift to yourself. And he's right here in this story, wrapped around you like a blanket of stardust and laughter. Maybe tonight you'll dream of him. Maybe you'll hear him playing a soft song on his viola, the notes stretching across the night sky like a lullaby. And maybe, just maybe, you'll feel a little less alone. Because in the land of Ooh, and in the hearts of everyone who's ever watched Adventure Time, Jake the dog lives on. Not loudly, but softly, like the final ripple on a still pond, like the tail end of a beautiful dream. And now, it's time to rest. Thanks for spending this time with us. Good night, and remember, everything's gonna be okay, man.